Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I wanted to talk to everybody about runes and masteries for the 2015 season. I'm going to talk about not only what to do if you don't have very much IP, if you're not level 30 maybe, as well as what to do if you have all the resources at your disposal. These are going to be rune and mastery pages that I've seen the pros use, as well as things from my own experience, and hopefully talk to you guys about some of the theory behind what kinds of pages you'll want to make and what's actually pretty good. So I'm just going to get my list together and we're going to go over, to start out, if you don't have much IP or RP to buy pages, what are the rune pages you should make? Well, to me there are 2 to 3 really big pages that you should make if you're going to make rune pages. The first one is going to be the default AD carry page. And it's going to be 4 different types of runes, of course, and it's going to be my 15th page. So I'm going to, actually, this is it. I actually put it on the right spot in the first place. So this is attack damage marks. Attack damage marks actually go very far for you. They're good on pretty much every single auto attack champion in the game. There are a few exceptions, but if you have low IP, this is a very good investment. Attack damage marks are incredibly strong. The second one is armor seals, flat armor seals. If you're in a duo lane, you always want flat stats. If you're in a duo lane, you're not going to gain a whole lot of levels, so by comparison to getting scaling runes, they're much more useful because you're going to be below level 6 for a larger percentage of the game, so it pushes your intention that way. Flat armor seal is also a great investment. In the dual lane as an AD carry, flat magic resist glyphs are also very good. There's typically a lot of magic damage in that lane. There's a lot of magic damage supports. There's also a few magic damage AD carries like Corki and Kog'Maw, and just in general, they're still a decent investment and pretty good. And most pros outside of China run 9 magic resist glyphs. The quintessences for basically every single AD carry are 3 attack speed quintessences. Now this is an investment that is largely only for AD carries. It's pretty good on a few junglers as well, but not mandatory nor always standard on them. So if you're more of an AD carry player than a solo lane player, you want attack speed quintessences. Otherwise, if you are maybe more of a top laner, or you play a lot of like Talon and things like that, then instead you'll invest in attack damage quintessences. Once again, it's a very similar page: attack damage marks, armor seals, magic resist glyphs, and attack damage quintessences. This is a page that will work on about half of all the champions in the game. This is okay for AD carries as well. It's not quite optimal, but it's not too bad. And so if you're strapped for IP, you make one of these 2 pages as your first your first page. This is your attack damage champion page. Again, flat defenses, they're good no matter what. You can optimize if you have more room for runes and masteries, but by and large this is fine. And again, attack damage marks good on most champions. Attack damage or attack speed quints quite good otherwise. Now I'm going to open up one of the other pages you might want to do, and I'm going to modify this one slightly. Again, if you are strapped for IP, then here is the other type of page you might make. It is magic penetration marks instead of attack damage marks. This is good on the other half of the champions. Honestly, even if you had unlimited resources, 90% of your builds would hold magic penetration or flat attack damage marks. Once again, armor seals, magic resist glyphs, they are good pretty much no matter what. And your other new rune is going to be ability power quintessences. So again, if you're strapped for IP, if you're strapped for RP, these are the 2 pages you'll want to make. Magic pen, armor, magic resist, ability power, or attack damage, armor, magic resist, ability, attack damage, or instead of that one, attack damage, armor, MR, attack speed. Those are going to be pretty standard, pretty strong, just default runes. So there you go. If you just need runes to start in the new season, those are your openings. Now let's move on to what happens if you have a whole lot more IP and RP at your disposal. If you have 20 rune pages like I do, if you have enough IP to make whatever you want like I do. Well, let's start going through. And I'm going to actually categorize these by lane. And the way I do this is I count the lanes: top, jungle, mid, AD carry, support, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And to denote that, it's kind of silly, but I actually use the emotes on an American US keyboard. Shift 1 is an exclamation point. And so the first lane, the top lane, exclamation point, this is going to be the rune page for Maokai or Singed. And so we're going to just cut all the runes out and we're going to start over. So a lot of pros for Maokai specifically run attack speed marks. This allows them to trigger their passive a lot more often during the laning phase, during fights. That makes sense. It's pretty strong. It's a way to get themselves some good sustain. I think Magic Pen, though, is also quite good. Maokai has reasonable damage output. It allows him to bully his opponents in lane. He's going to build a Rod of Ages no matter what. Same for Singed. Their magic damage output's actually pretty relevant, and so I'm actually going to recommend running Magic Pen marks as well. Attack speed, again, works just fine for Maokai. I would not run attack speed for Singed, but that's an option. For seals, there's two big options, and the way I kind of think about it is there are two major seals for a top laner. You can run flat armor or scaling armor. And the way I think about it is, honestly, I think scaling runes are better almost no matter what in a solo lane. With very, very few exceptions would I change. And it's, again, because level 6 is pretty easy to gain in a solo lane, so why not get that anyway? And in 2015, your level 1 stats are higher than they were before, because of the season changes. If you're not sure about those, you can read up on it. But suffice it to say, the value of flat runes is slightly diminished in solo lanes in 2015. So we're going to use scaling runes for almost every single rune slot that we can get away with in a solo lane sort of setup. So for my top lane, I'm going to run scaling armor. And again, if I'm Maokai or Singed, and I just am personally a big Singed player, Maokai is still a common top laner, but any of these magic damage top laners that are a little bit tanky, these sort of bruiser type guys, Shyvana would actually run hybrid pen, but otherwise, again, a very similar setup here where you'd run some kind of magic damage increase and scaling armor and magic resist. So we're going to do scaling armor, scaling magic resist, and then for Maokai and Singed specifically, they actually like ability power quints. And so this is our first top lane page. It's a magey, tanky top laner, right? Magic Pen, tanky defense, but ability power is still good. Maokai or Singed, there's the first one. Okay, second one out here is going to be a Dr. Mundo page. Now, Dr. Mundo is another tanky type guy, and in fact, this would be a page that you would run on Shyvana as well, pretty much. Hybrid pen marks, you do care about your basic attack damage. You also care a whole lot about your magic damage here, and so hybrid pen's a pretty good pickup here. Magic pen is just fine as well if you don't have that. Attack damage is reasonable on top of that one. Again, scaling armor, scaling defensive runes are incredibly strong on champions like Dr. Mundo or Shyvana or any of these tanky top laner guys. And then you can run cooldown per level quintessences. Now, it's really up to you what you want to run here. Cooldown does not affect Mundo's W in any meaningful way, so you don't necessarily need cooldown, but he's always going to build something like a Spirit Visage. He's going to want that high uptime for maybe Cleaver CDR, for more ultimates, things like this, so cooldown does make sense on a champion like Dr. Mundo. It also makes sense on a champion like Shyvana a little bit, although, again, scaling magic resist, plenty good as well, and this is, again, a type of page that pros have used before, and I recommend it pretty highly. This is the much more big tank type guys, and again, because champions like Mundo and Shyvana are not very strong laners, you want a way to get out of the lane phase safely, and so you run actually health regeneration quintessences. You're going to kind of overkill yourself on regen. This is, again, so you can get out of the laning phase pretty safely and just scale up because you want to keep going into the late game. This is pretty strong overall. Okay, let's go into our next top lane page. This is going to be for something like Jarvan, if you're going to run just someone who wanted to deal a lot of physical damage but didn't care that much about attack speed. This is going to be a 15 AD page. We're going to rename this, by the way. This is actually going to be 15 AD resists. And this is, again, just a guy who's going to stack attack damage, just cares about his physical spell burst, has meaningful auto attacks as well. And this is kind of the interesting thing about the way to build runes and masteries. And we're going to get myself, where are they? Here we go. Scaling armor. Scaling magic resist. Again, this is going to be a very common trend here. Quintessences. You're going to run 3 attack damage quintessences. 15 AD. It's a very standard page. Now, at this point, I want to talk about something that's kind of interesting about optimizing your runes and masteries. Or, sorry, your runes specifically. Because there's three big ways to build an attack damage champion. Okay, so number one is I care more about my auto attacks. And that's going to be attack damage marks, and like we had on the AD carry page, attack speed quints, and then, again, you're in defense here for the most part. Attack damage marks, attack speed quints. You could also run, if you're a little bit less concerned about your auto attacks, you want to kind of hedge your bets, you do attack damage marks, and attack damage quints. There is also a page, and I'm going to put it right here. This is actually what I would put in for maybe an assassin. This is and this is actually it's going to run attack damage marks as it did before, or sorry, attack damage quints as it did before, but the marks are actually going to be armor penetration. Okay, and so this is we're just going to do this, an assassin. Right, and this is the three major types of attack damage pages you're going to make. I care about my auto attacks, attack damage, attack speed. I care about almost entirely my spells, and that's armor pen and attack damage. Or I'm kind of a mix of both, attack damage and attack damage. And I think in the top lane, you actually care a lot about your physical auto attack damage. It's going to help you last hit under turret, which is actually quite meaningful. It's going to help you in extended auto attack trades versus enemy champions. And by and large, you get quite a lot out of stacking up to 15 AD. A champion like... Actually, the bad examples are abound here, because if you're a champion like Jax or Aurelia, you care more about your attack speed, and so you'd run a page more like this. Jax or Aurelia would want attack speed quintessences. And in fact, if we're going to make another page here, this would be an example of a Jax Aurelia page. If you want to do this here, Jax Aurelia would be running something more like attack speed marks, or not attack speed marks, sorry, just wrong about that one, that was 2 seasons ago. Attack damage marks, scaling armor, as you always do in the seal slot, scaling magic resist, as you always do in the glyph slot, and because you care a lot about your auto attacks, you're going to attack speed quintessences. Okay. Just going to build a couple things in. All right, this is page I already had built, 15 AD armor MR, and it's gonna come to me later on, but there's gonna be champions. Again, I want to say champions like Jarvan, I think, that are relevant here, where you'd want this type of page, 15 AD, and just in case you care a lot, like there's a really big bully matchup, there's a page here for flat armor, flat magic resist. I'm not sure how much you're gonna need that, but it's here just in case. So we can see I'm a magic damage dealer in the top lane. I'm a tank in the top lane, who typically has hybrid damage. 15 AD guy with scaling resists, 15 AD guy with flat resists, and then we start moving on to things that might start going into the jungle. Probably not with scaling armor stuff here. This would probably be maybe a jungle Vi, for example, or again a jungle Jarvan, a jungle maybe Nocturne, but he starts caring about attack speed here. Let's keep moving on. All right, we're just going to start getting into a couple more interesting pages. So if I'm an assassin, right, armor pen marks, attack damage quintessences. Now we're actually do something a little bit different here. If you are more of an assassin type player, like if you're a Fiora, you actually care a lot about your cooldowns more than your tank stats. You are still going to run scaling armor because scaling armor is strong in a lot of situations, but you could run one of either one here. You can actually run scaling armor or scaling health. Both are good. I'm going to recommend scaling armor. But if I'm an assassin type guy, I'm going to run a page kind of like this. I want the cooldowns per level because I want to cast my spells a lot more late game. If you're versus an ability power based matchup, a magic damage matchup, you would run health seals here. Otherwise, if you're unsure, armor seals are just fine. But health seals are not as incredible as you would actually expect. They are pretty good, but they're not. And again, they are efficient for sure. But you still want to think about what type of damage you're facing late game, and armor does beat out health if you are going to be facing physical damage late game. Even if you expect a Last Whisper on the enemy team, you still actually care a lot about scaling armor here. So this is one with cooldowns, and just to be safe, we can do it again with health. So let's run, Assassin 2. I'm going to do a very similar page here, but this time we're going to do it with health per level. We're going to run the armor pen marks, as you do. We're going to run the CDR still, because even though magic resist is nice, CDR is more important. And once again, we're going to run attack damage quintessence because they're just most efficient for that slot, even for an assassin. So these are our two big assassin pages. You simply switch one rune out, armor or health, and let's move on. Okay, let's talk about some tank junglers, or let's talk about some junglers specifically. So there's going to be jungler, let's do like a Nocturne. Yes, actually no, I take that back, sorry, I'm thinking about the wrong page. This is going to be like a Nautilus type page. And so again, we're going to get a couple different options here. I've seen a lot of different theories for junglers and what types of runes they pick up here. But we're going to start with one of the obvious ones. We are definitely going flat armor on every jungler in the game. Last season, a few guys experimented with scaling armor, and that's okay. That's okay. Scaling armor was okay last season, but in 2015, I think you have to run flat armor in the jungle. Reason number one is because, well, you're facing a lot of physical damage in the jungle. You're also level 1 when you start the jungle, and your first clear is important. And so you just need the stats. The other big one is junglers do not level up as fast as solo laners do. They level up about as fast as AD carries. And much like an AD carry, you're actually in combat a lot at level 1. Junglers do level up faster than supports typically do, but they're leveling up roughly as fast as a duo laner does. So they're hitting level 6, and level 6, by the way, is the break point for flat versus scaling. For most rune types, not all of them, but it is the case for armor, and it is the case for health seals as well. And we're talking about seals for the most part in this case. Armor makes your potions more efficient, armor makes your sustain tools more efficient. Armor is something you want flat here no matter what. Now, marks, if I'm someone like a Nautilus or a Sejuani, I actually get a lot of value, oddly enough, out of attack speed marks. This is actually one of the most efficient ways to just increase your DPS in the early jungle. This gives you 15% more auto attacks. Auto attacks are going to be one of the most important ways for you to deal more damage. They even have a couple of soft synergies, for example. If you ever have some kind of on-hit damage, like if you ever went Devour enchant for some reason, if you're a champion like jungle, what's the champion I'm thinking of? Shyvana. Shyvana actually has a reason to go attack speed here. If you're jungle Maokai, any of these sort of tank junglers are going to want something like this with attack speed marks because auto attacks are going to be the best way to increase your damage output to the jungle. The other thing I'm going to say, the second thing I'm going to say about this is, to my knowledge, none of the basic jungle monsters have magic resist. None of them have any. Dragon and Baron do, but almost every other jungle camp is at 0 MR. And so you do not care about Magic Pen for your actual jungle clear. It doesn't do anything for you. So it's not all that useful to run Magic Pen. Hybrid Pen, probably not either. Again, flat armor, attack speed marks. This is going to work on, again, most of your junglers, of your tank junglers specifically. This is Nautilus. Again, we'll just write in Shyvana as well, just because it'll remind us of what we're talking about. Now, for the glyphs, there are a few options. I've seen a lot of different ones. Let's talk about specifically a Mumu, or any kind of tank jungler. Well, I've seen a couple different ways people do it. Now, one of the interesting things about magic resist glyphs is magic resist glyphs actually do not have the same breakpoint that armor glyphs do. So, for example, that armor seals do. For example, an armor seal is worth 1 armor, and at level 18, a scaling seal is worth 3 armor, and the breakpoint is level 6. Well, in this case, if we do I did ability power here. Sorry, let me pick the right rune out. If I look at magic resist, 3 glyphs, right, give me 4 MR flat, whereas the scaling ones only give me 9 MR 18. So the breakpoint is actually much later. It's closer to around level 7 or 8. And so unless you think you can get to level 7 or 8 without taking meaningful magic damage, you don't have much of a reason to take scaling magic resist on a jungler. Now there's 2 thoughts here. One is none of the jungle camps deal magic damage, and in fact you're not even going to see an enemy champion until at least level 3 in most cases. But at the same time, you are a jungler. You do level up more slowly than other than other roles typically, and so you're going to be on average lower level, thus reducing the value of scaling magic resist. So if you're going to try to make a page for yourself, keep this in mind that it's not quite as strong as taking scaling armor in the general case, but also you're not facing magic damage at level 1, so maybe you don't care quite as hard. Ultimately, I've seen a couple of pros kind of mix and match. I think that's an okay way to do it. That's fine. You can do it this way if you care. Like this is an okay page if you wanted to. And then for your quintessences, there are a couple different options. For me, I'm actually going to make the page as though I'm a Moo, because that's the page I actually wanted to make it for. And as a Moo, I'm going to run ability power quintessences. This is an okay way to make a page. There are a lot of different options here. You could run Magic Pen theoretically on a Moo and just rely on your spells for clears, which is more the case for someone like a Moo. Honestly, there's a whole lot of ways you can make it. This is actually one of the more difficult pages to make. You could run movement speed quintessences as well. It hurts your clear speed quite a lot, but it can help you. You could also run, you could actually run armor quints. That works just fine, and it increases your durability in the jungle. You'll take even less damage. Works just fine for someone like Nautilus. There are a million ways to make this type of page. In fact, let's just pretend I'm Nautilus, and we'll make the page like this. This will make my shield last longer. I'll get more clears out of the jungle. Attack speed quints are good. Get some magic resist in there because magic resist is nice. If you wanted to, you could run some scaling cooldown instead. This way I hedge all of my bets. Like all these glyphs are fine. You can make kind of all of these. But this, you know what, let's just make this our page. I don't know. Like we didn't see a lot of tank jungles in actual professional play, so I can't easily bite off pages they would make. If I was like Jungle Maokai here, I would do something more like this. Again, ability power quintessences to get some extra spell damage, which will help my clear speed. Attack speed marks still good on most junglers, and then you have something like this. So who knows? There's a lot of options here. There's a lot of ones to go for. It's kind of hard to know for sure. Let's actually push these forward a little bit. This is going to be AP Jungler. So let's say I'm an ability power jungler. I actually do care about my spell damage overall. I'm Fiddlesticks. I'm AP Amumu. Let's run this page. Well, in this case, I actually will finally run Magic Pen Marks. Even though these things do nothing for me in the jungle clear, except for like taking a dragon, I can faithfully run Magic Pen Marks in the jungle if I care so much about my spell damage that I'm going to do it anyway. Let's run Flat Armor Seals. I can run Ability Power Flat or Ability Power per level glyphs. And once again, this has the interesting breakpoint of it's not actually 3-to-1. Not quite, right? This is 3.6, this is 9.3. I'm not quite tripling the value at level 18 of my ability power. It actually pushes me a little bit more towards running flat AP. And in fact, the best way to do this is to run all the way flat AP on this spot. For quintessences, I'm going to do the same thing. If I am an AP jungler like a Mumu or Fiddlesticks, I actually want to run a page more like this. The extra early ability power helps my clear speed. Again, until I reach level about 8, I don't break even with the AP per level. And at that point, I'm buying other ability power sources anyway, thus slightly reducing the need to have scaling AP. It's not too bad. Let's go for this. This is an AP jungle page. It's pretty easy. You actually run a lot of the runes you did before if you have only a few pages. All you really do is sub out AP glyphs instead of armor glyphs for your old AP page, and that's just fine. This is a pretty easy to run AP jungle page. Okay, so we've gone through 9 pages. Oh, and by the way, this is something I forgot about actually with the earlier pages. If I am like Jungle Master Yi, this is the page that Dandy uses, by the way. This is Dandy's Jungle Master Yi page. It also is run on a lot of other junglers like Kha'Zix. You run a couple of cooldown glyphs. This is the Dandy page. He runs 5% CDR in glyphs. You could make the case for running armor pen marks. I understand it. It makes sense. But just in case, again, 15 AD says you care about your auto attacks about as much as you care about your spells. And in the jungle, you need to use your spells. If you run armor pen marks here, you lower your auto attack damage in the jungle. because you're not getting any bonus AD for a long time, up until about 1,000 gold in, attack damage is a higher damage increase than armor pen early on in the jungle for auto attacks. Not for spells, but for auto attacks. On top of that, Lee Sin, he has a magic damage E, so armor pen does not help that either, whereas attack damage does. So in a couple specific cases, you do care about AD more than armor pen. The chat was asking about armor pen versus attack damage before. Here you go. This is part of the reason you run that on a page that might care about the jungle. Okay. There's our big jungle pages. We can reuse the 15 AD pages for the jungle. This is why this one has flat armor. This one is scaling in case you care about a different one, but this would be like an AD jungler, really, to be specific. This is more of an AD jungler. So let's move on. Let's start talking about our ability power pages. Let's talk about our mid lane pages. Mid lane, and we're going to go armor AP. Okay, so mid lane armor AP, and just like in every single mid lane page, we're going to run magic pen marks. In fact, we're going to make 4 of these pages, so we're going to keep doing this. We're going to run a whole bunch of magic pen pages. Right, we're going to make 4 of them. It's going to be glorious. Don't mind the names of these pages right now. We're just putting in magic pen because this is the page we're going to be using for a lot of stuff here. All right, here we go. Let's start talking about the various types of mid lane AP pages we're going to make. The first one is I'm facing a physical damage laner, and I care about my armor at level 1. Now, you could make the case for running scaling armor if you don't think you're going to get bullied out early on, like maybe you're facing a Talon or something. But by and large, if you're facing a physical damage mid laner, you want armor at level 1 because they can harass you early on pretty easily. And you're going to buy a Zhonya's anyway, and so the value of armor per level is slightly diminished since you're going to be buying more armor regardless. And so this is okay. You can run flat armor. You again could run scaling armor. You're a solo laner, you're going to level up pretty quickly, but it's a little bit greedy to run scaling armor in the mid lane. I would typically not do that. We're going to run, in the case that we know we're facing a physical damage mid laner, we don't care about magic resist, we're going to run ability power per level in the glyph spot. Even though ability power doesn't break even with flat ability power to level 8 or 9, we're going to do this instead because we level up really quickly as an AP champion, as a mid laner. So this is pretty easy to grab and we can move on. And the default here is going to be AP quintessences. All right, this is I'm in the mid lane. I'm facing a physical damage dealer up in the lane. That's going to be just fine. All right. Next one is going to be, well, what if I'm facing something scary? AP magic resist. What if I'm facing a magic damage dealer that I really care about? It's a level 6 all-in. It's really scary. I'm very afraid of my opponent. Well, let's run flat magic resist. Flat magic resist again, because this is the damage type I care about. In my initial lane matchups, I'm worried about getting bullied. This is a big risk for me. So I'm going to run flat defenses in the lane in question because it's a big deal. Okay. And mages tend to be fairly frail in the mid lane. Now, again, we want to run a scaling stat when possible in a solo lane, right? Unless you care about that stat, right now, you want to run a scaling rune in your lanes if possible. I didn't mean to click ability power. You could. I've seen people run scaling ability power. They typically don't. Most pros run scaling health in the mid lane. 90% of rune pages in the mid lane have scaling health in them. Health is a good catch-all. It's fine. You could run armor instead if you're not typically going to buy a lot of armor. And in fact, you could run both. You could run a mix of either one. That wouldn't be too bad as well. But scaling health is one of the best ways to survive other mages later in the game. If you're going to be in mage duels, that's just fine. The normal rune for quintessences is, as always, flat ability power. It's just a very efficient quintessence. We could do the math later, but by and large, this is the quint you want to run. So, 2 mid lane pages so far. Flat armor scaling AP, scaling health flat AP. Sorry, flat MR. I apologize. Yeah, magic resist page. All right, let's run another magic damage, another mid laner page. This one's going to be armor MR. Just in case I really, whoops, I hit caps lock. Let's do this with capitalization properly. for some reason I really care about taking a lot of damage in my lane, or I don't know what my lane is for some reason, you can run this page. And this page, by the way, works in a lot of top lane matches as well. If you think back to something like this, or something like this, or something like this, it's a pretty similar setup, right? You're running a lot of flat defenses. It's going to work in all of your pages, in all of your cases. And it's just like, look, if you want to be super defensive, if you're not sure what you're facing against, and you're really worried about getting bullied out, and this is, again, the page you make if you don't have a lot of IP. This is just a default page. It's like, well, it's blind pick. I don't really want to get killed. Let's just do this. And you're worried about getting aggressed on. You could replace that page with scaling health and flat ability power. And in fact, that's going to be our next one. This is basically AP Greedy. And this, by the way, is the page that 90% of pros are actually using in the mid lane, is this exact page. It is scaling ability power glyphs. It is scaling health seals. And again, we are in a solo lane, so scaling runes are very easy to have pay off. Magic Pen is the best mark. Ability power is the best quint. This is the standard, I guess I'll even call it AP standard. This is the standard AP page for the mid lane. You actually typically do not run magic resist glyphs in the mid lane. It's only if you care very heavily about getting assassinated in the mid lane. So just in case, you might run this page. If you're facing a mid laner that does physical damage, like a Fiora, like a Talon, you do want to run this. By the way, you do run this page against something like a Kali, something like LeBlanc. You do want to run this page. I think it's very much more worthwhile that you don't die immediately, especially with Chalice of Harmony being much less bot. Getting some extra MR, very, very valuable. I do highly recommend this page for certain matchups. Health per level is still just fine. Okay. Here are our 4 big AP pages. Now let's talk about another mid laner page. Mid laner we all know and love, Yasuo. Now Yasuo, I've seen a lot of different pages for Yasuo. I've seen this page for Yasuo. Max Armor Pen, Max Armor. This was Dade's page. I believe he did Magic Resist, but I don't remember. He might have done CDR per level, and then he did attack damage. This is kind of the standard assassin type pattern. I personally prefer something a little different. I think one of the best ways to build him. In fact, we're going to do this what I think is the right way. We are in a solo lane after all. We are going to run some Armor Pen because Armor Pen is very good. But we're going to run 5 critical chance marks and a critical chance seal. This gives me the 5% CDR to max my CDR, or to still, to max my crit. And then again, I'm in a solo lane, so I'm going to run scaling armor and scaling magic resist. I think this is an acceptable way to do it. I think this is just fine. So I think this is one of the better ways to build up Yasuo. Now you could make the case that you want more flat AD just to make last hitting easier because you're not going to have a whole lot. But again, I think you do want to get a 5% crit chance thing. I think scaling resists are good for a solo lane. And I think this is one of the right ways to play him. Some players in the LCS have also run they've run flat armor and flat magic resist because they're so concerned with his early laning phase. I have also seen lifesteal quintessences. It just depends on the player. I believe Voyboy has run a couple lifesteal quintessences. You can, but it seems to be a style choice to run lifesteal or AD. I personally think it's okay to go for just straight up go on attack damage. It's greedy, but I think it's one of the best ways to go about it. You can also run attack speed quintessences. This will give you 15% attack speed. That makes your Qs come out faster. That's also a page you can go for. There's a lot of options out there. Really, there are There's a million ways to go about it, but I think you should go for the scaling resists. I think you should go for the 5 crit. Although, again, I will preface that most pros do not go for the 5 crit. They seem to not value the max crit chance. I just think it's a good DPS optimization. That if you're going to run Armor Pen in the first place as a DPS optimization, you should go crit as a DPS optimization. That's my personal feeling on it. But there's a lot of different pages out there. Okay. Let's talk about AD carry pages now. AD carry page default, we went over this a little bit earlier ago in the stream. Attack damage marks, flat armor seals, flat magic resist glyphs, attack speed quintessences. This is a standard defensive setup. You don't want to get harassed out by a Karma or a Sona. You don't want to get harassed out by the Caitlyn. In fact, every single AD carry should literally always run 9 armor seals. And the reason that we're running flat armor seals is there's actually some thought put into, well, what type of runes do we put in? Around the middle of 2014, when there were a bunch of rune changes, we made health seals better, we made armor quints pretty good, there were a lot of different options. And the thing is, AD carries have a lot of sustain. They're going to use potions, they're going to have healing supports a lot of the time, they're going to have lifesteal from their Doran's Blade, they're going to eventually buy a Vamp Scepter, they're going to get health back from the Butcher and Feast masteries. And so realistically, you're actually going to get a lot of extra health back, which increases the value of armor compared to health. And because you'll be taking a lot of hits over the course of time, you want to be running these armor seals pretty frequently. And flat armor, because you're going to be dealing a lot of damage early on, you're not going to level up very often as an AD carry, as a duo laner, so you want to run flat defenses, ideally. MR, again, for a similar case. As an AD carry, attack speed quints just simply are the most efficient. You want to run 3 attack speed quints in 95% of cases. It's a good quint to get. Attack damage marks, again, they're just kind of better. You could run Armor Pen and it would technically be damage efficient. It would break even with attack damage marks very early on, especially on a champion like Graves. You might care a whole lot about Armor Pen quints. The problem is, it is very hard for you to last hit in that case. Losing out on this 8.5 attack damage is actually a really big way to lose out on last hits and lose out on, I mean, the level 1 trade's not that important. You're not going to typically trade at level 1. But again, all pros are running attack damage marks. I think it's fine. You could run Armor Pen once again, but it's a bit of a stretch to do so. That's all I'm going to say. You could, but it increases your difficulties. This is the default page. Next page, let's get another AD carry page in here. This is going to be AD carry greedy / China. This is the rune page that almost all the Chinese AD carries ran in the World Championship. We're still running attack quints, attack speed quints. We're still going to be running attack damage marks. We're still going to be running armor seals, but we're only going to run a very few magic resist glyphs, and the rest are going to be attack speed. Now, attack speed glyphs are only 0.64% attack speed, but, you know, this is about 4% attack speed more. About. It's not quite, and in fact, the rounding kind of lies to you because 3 attack speed quints is actually, I believe, 13.5, and this is 17 flat, when you're really getting about 13.3% attack, or sorry, 17.3% attack speed, I believe is the number here. We're gaining 4% attack speed off of this, or close to it. Now, you're only getting 4 MR, but this is the page that they were using. This basically says, look, I'm not going to take a lot of magic damage in the actual matchup. And the thing is, the ability power champion you're against, like a Karma or whatnot, yes, they're going to run flat magic pen, but they're not often going to buy Sork shoes, and so their magic damage does fall off after a little while. The thought is also that when you face up against a mid laner, because they're going to have Sork shoes and runes and a Void Staff, your magic resist runes don't go very far anyway, and that's actually fairly true. Let's say you had 30 magic resist, and the enemy mid laner had Void Staff and Masteries. They would cut your resists out by about 40%, and so you'd have about 18 magic resist left. With Sork shoes and runes, you don't have any MR anyway. You actually get cut to 0. And so if you had, let's say, 42, like you ran all the MR glyphs, well, 0.6 times 0.4, again, we're doing rough approximations, is only 24. With Magic Pen marks and Sork shoes, you get cut to 0 again. And so you roughly don't have magic resist glyphs late game anyway against a well-fed magic damage dealer. We think about Rumbles, if they're going to run Haunting Guys and Sork shoes, that's 30 flat pen, plus another 7-ish from runes. And the 6% they get from masteries, once again, they're cutting 38 MR off you anyway. And so you don't actually have that much value in magic resist glyphs because you're typically going to lose all the MR because of percent pen, and the rest gets cut off from flat pen. So a lot of Chinese AD carries kind of intelligently identified that, you know what, we're not really going to make much use out of these. Let's just get another 4% attack speed. It's actually not a bad way to think about it. But again, if you are facing a heavily harassed heavy lane, if you're facing a Karma or a Sona or something like this, maybe you want to run this page. Also, if the mid laner roams down to you early on, or you have like an Amumu jungle coming in, then you do care about the flat MR coming in. It does matter to you. So there's reasons to go this instead of this. I think the Chinese players are actually really smart about this, and running attack speed glyphs are actually pretty intelligent here. Now, there's one more AD carry page we're going to make. This is going to be ADC Caster. This is a rarely used page, but I've seen it occasionally. For marks, once again, you're going to run physical damage because they all run it. For seals, you're going to run armor because they all run it. For glyphs, you're going to run, the same stuff. But I actually want to talk about something. So this is the page that we were going to make, the page that the pros were using. Very rarely, but occasionally they did it. They ran this, not this page, they ran one attack speed quint. 1 or 2 attack speed quints. They did either this or they did that. Now, they were running 1 to 2 attack damage quints. Now, here's the thing. I want to optimize this a little bit. I want to optimize this rune page because I don't think this is actually the right page. I think pros are typically very bad at math. Let's do what the Chinese, let's actually combine all of our information, all the information we had before. Let's combine what the Chinese AD carriers were doing with what is probably optimal for a caster. So let's run this first of all. Let's do the page, the glyphs that the Chinese players were using. Let's also match that same amount of attack speed we had before, right? That 13-14%, that 7.8 attack damage. Let's go to 7.0. That's pretty close. And then we're going to do a page like this. Now let's compare these two pages. The default AD carry and our newly constructed AD carry caster page. Well, a default AD carry had 14 attack speed, 8.5 attack damage, 9 armor, 12 magic resist. We have a little bit less attack damage. Okay, relevant. A little less attack speed. Also relevant. Same armor. A little bit less magic resist. But we have some armor pen here. And armor pen is a valuable multiplier here for your spells. In fact, just to make it a little bit easier on everyone, let's actually bring this physical damage quint back in. And so we are losing out on a little bit of attack speed, right? We're at 8.3 instead of 14%. But we are getting 5 armor pen. And actually we can get more than that. We can bring the AD right where it was before to 8.3. That's almost identical. 8.3, 8.5, basically the same number. But we've managed to sneak in 5 armor pen quintessences. We've lost a little bit of attack speed. We're only getting it here from this and this one attack speed quint. But we now have a whole bunch of armor pen. And if we're like, Lucian, Graves, these types of champions, we don't care as much about attack speed because, well, Lucian has an auto attack reset and a bunch of spell damage. Graves has actually an attack speed steroid in his kit and, a bunch of spell damage. This is actually a more optimal page for a champion like this. You're going to get more damage output. You have the same last hitting power. You have a little bit less attack speed, but who really cares? And suddenly, we have given ourselves a really, really good page. This is actually a good page to run for a champion like this. Now, I would never, ever, ever run this page on someone like Kog'Maw or Corki because they don't have meaningful physical damage spells. For these guys, I would run this or this. But hey, suddenly you've got this really cool page that you can run for the AD casters. And I really, really, really believe, even though we have not seen this page in pro play, this is the type of page that you should be running if you're one of these champions. If you're really concerned about magic damage burst, maybe you run this instead and you lose out, but it's pretty valuable. Okay, now let's talk about the types of pages that we can run in the support role. First of all, I want to bring something up. I've seen this done wrong by pros before, so I want to bring this up here for everyone. Let's talk about AP Quints and Mana Regen Quints and AP Glyphs and Mana Regen Glyphs. Okay, if you're going to run both these types of runes, I want to point something out to you guys. Here is what a Mana Regen Glyph gives you. 0.33 mana regen per second. Here's what a Mana Regen Quint gives you. Less than 4 times as much mana regen as a glyph gives you, right? This is a roughly 3.5 to 1 ratio, or it's roughly 4 to 1. A quint is 4 times as good as a glyph. Let's talk about ability power. 1.2 to 4.9. If you multiply this number by 4, you get 4.8. This is still higher, which means if you're going to run ability power, you should run it as a quintessence, and if you're going to run mana regen, you should run it as a glyph. Now, this doesn't count things like armor and health gain, but if you're going to run both ability power and mana regen, you should be running ability power on quints and mana regen on glyphs. This is actually fairly relevant. It's fairly important. Keep this in mind. Okay, let's talk about a caster support. Now this is going to be Lulu. So this is caster, Lulu, Janna, these types of guys, right? These guys are going to cast a lot of spells. And there's actually 2 different types of marks you could run here. I think the ideal one is Magic Pen. You could also run attack damage because they have good attack ranges. This also counts for Sona. Now here's where it gets interesting with supports. Supports run different runes than other classes. Because supports have less need for their quintessence slots to be hyper efficient. Supports actually really, really want to be tanky. And so they actually run a page that no one else runs, which is oftentimes health seals and armor quints. Let me find it. There we go. They run 2 to 3 armor quints. In fact, yeah, this is the type of page that is often run in a support. Is something like this. In fact, we're going to make it easy. Let's just finish this page out, and we're going to talk about other champions sooner. There's actually an easier case study for these types of champions. Now, for glyphs, I'm going to kind of semi-break this rule, but they are actually going to run typically 1 less quintessence, and they're going to run something like this. 16 ability power, no magic resist, and a page kind of like this. This is a pretty standard caster support page. This was something that was run in the World Championship on a lot of the pros. It was a page kind of like this. A lot of extra health, a lot of extra armor, right? They're rivaling the stats brought out by other champions. They get 16 AP and a lot of magic pen. They actually have higher base damages than actual mid laner mages do. But they're getting, more types of stats out here. This is actually very comparable to this page. 9 armor, 7.8 magic pen, 15 ability power, and basically instead of AP per level, they're getting health. Like, this is almost the same page as this page. It's just a little bit more efficient. You're getting extra flat health, but you're not getting AP per level. That's what this page basically does. And in fact, it's a better version, I would say, of this page in the case of you're not that worried about magic damage. Like, this is, and also it's a better version of this page. Like, this is a page also that you would run if you had not very much IP and RP, because you can reuse these pages from the AD carry or top laner page and the jungle page. But theoretically, this could give you more value if you didn't care about getting scaling AP in the mid lane. Like, it's very comparable to this type of page where you're just getting armor and AP, but in this case you kind of want the scaling AP. It's pretty useful. But whatever, this is a page that you often typically run. Auto attacks are used a lot in the bottom lane. You're going to pull minion aggro a lot. You're going to get hit by the enemy AD carry a lot, so you do care about getting some flat armor. And health is just good because it's health. Health is very strong. But as a caster type, you expect yourself to be hitting abilities more than you're getting hit. In the general case, that's true, because you're ranged. You should be hitting more than you get hit. The extra power on your shield is quite nice, and you could go really greedy here and run more ability power, but you really shouldn't. You want to make sure you don't get all in. As a support, you need to have some tank stats. I want to emphasize this very heavily. You cannot run a full greedy page like this. This is not an acceptable support page. You will get killed very frequently. You should never run a page like that as a support. But this is like a caster support page. It's pretty strong. Now let's talk about a tank support. Let's talk about a tank support. This is champions like Thresh, like Taric, like Leona. We're going to learn a lot of the same lessons we did before. We're going to run health seals. We're actually going to run magic resist glyphs this time around because we're tanks. We care about that. We are going to run the armor quints that we did before, and we're actually going to run either 2 or 3. Now, Doublelift said that he told Afremu that he theory crafted this, and that instead of an armor quint, one of the armor quints, you should run a health quint. I'm personally not sold. I don't think you should cut one out for a health quint. While armor would probably while health might give you slightly higher level 1 stats for an all-in, armor does more with your Targon's Brace regen. It's going to give you more for your base health regen. It's going to make your potions more efficient as well because you're running at least 3 of them. And you're going to run actually attack damage as your mark of choice. This helps Thresh, specifically with Targon stacks. This just helps Leona and Taric in general if they're going to auto-attack trade. Thing is, champions like Leona and Taric, let's think about this for a second, and even Thresh, they don't do enough magic damage for it to matter. Like, them doing 6% more magic damage doesn't mean almost anything. Taric does have a little bit of magic damage that he deals. Leona's Sunlight, by the way, is triggered by allies, so it's their magic pen that matters. You don't get any value out of it. And in general, the bonus AD is just better. It's a better trading tool. You're going to get auto attacks down into your opponents. In fact, a lot of supports like Annie would actually run attack damage marks because their attack range is so high. They were going to land autos more than they landed spells. And so attack damage marks should not be underrated as a support player. They're very strong. You get to reuse, again, some of these runes that you're going to use as a support in the first place. And in fact, the old page that we talked about before, this page is half decent for certain supports. And I believe it's basically this is half decent for some supports as well. It's not amazing, but it'll work. There's one more page we're going to talk about. This one is incredibly greedy. Incredibly greedy. And this is the Magic Pen support page. Now, I don't think this is optimal. For what it's worth, this is the page that was used, or close to the page that was used, by Pumandu on SKT back at All-Stars. Now, I think this was kind of a disrespect page because they won the entire tournament without losing a game. But this is a page that you use if the base damages on your spells are so darn high and have so low of AP ratios that you just care about Magic Pen. This is when you're a champion that has unanswerable harass. Your range is so high that you couldn't possibly be getting hit by your opponents. Now, this is a page that is very good on, for example, champions like Zyra, who do have very high base damages on their abilities, who are typically buying Liandry's as their main damage item and are actually able to buy Liandry's as a damage item, which again is champions like Zyra, or Brand. And you are stacking Magic Pen. Magic Pen marks, Magic Pen quints, Magic Pen glyphs, and then you're just trying to kind of have some level of defensive stats in your seals. 40 health, 40 armor. Now if we compare to this, it's not that much worse than 72 health, 8 armor. It's not that much worse. it is relevant how much worse it is. And again, if you're a champion like Janna or Lulu or Karma, you have shields, right? You have ways to supplement that loss of durability by healing yourself, right? By being Sona, by being anything. You know, this is a default AP support, right? This is just an AP support, right? And this is, of course, a tank support. This is, I am only going to harass. I have no defensive value whatsoever. Because, again, like if I'm Zyra, all I can do is deal damage with my skills, and Magic Pen is a more efficient way to deal damage than ability power in 90% of cases. And so you get a lot of damage out here. Brand support, Zyra support, those are the big ones. But if I'm Zillion, if I'm Janna, I have AP ratios that I care about that aren't damage, so I run ability power. That's the general rule here. And those are the 20 pages that we're going to run. These are the 20 pages that we're going to run if you have the ability to as an unlimited IP, unlimited RP type player. If you don't have nearly that much IP or RP, once again, let's talk about the major pages that you might run. Okay? If you don't have the ability to run 20 pages, let's talk about the pages that you should run. You should run a page like this: attack damage marks, armor seals, magic resist glyphs, and attack speed quintessences. Or you run a page a little bit more like this, which is attack damage quints instead. Don't mind the CDR, this is an optimization for later on, but armor, MR, attack damage. That's reasonable. And if you're a player who typically solo lanes more than you AD carry, you want this to be your first rune page ever bought. If you typically AD carry more than solo lane, you want this to be your first rune page ever bought. And in fact, attack speed quints, or sorry, it's this one. Attack speed quints are actually very good on Jax and Aurelia. They're even okay on Shyvana. And so this still works for a lot of top lane matchups as well. Just depends on what your champion pool is. One of these should be rune page number 1. The other one is this one. You're reusing the armor and magic resist, which is important because, again, you're obviously strapped for IP. And you run magic pen and ability power. This works for supports as well. This works for AP junglers as well. The 15 AD stuff is actually the optimal rune page for champions like Lee Sin and Kha'Zix. You could potentially run armor pen instead for Kha'Zix, but attack damage is still very strong as well. So these two pages will get you 95% of the way there for almost every single champion in the game. There are a few optimizations you can make from there, and so as you branch out, you want to start running things, little hybrid things, right? Like solo laners want to typically run scaling resists, armor per level, MR per level. CDR per level is good for champions like Mundo, who are going to buy magic resist anyway, but really want the cooldown uptime. Health regen quints are also very good for weak laners who need to survive, who don't scale off of stats that hard. Again, like Mundo, he just wants levels and gold. 15 AD, scaling resist, just a default page that's good for just a general case top laner where you're not really sure what you're going to be doing. Jax and Aurelia. Let's get some scaling stats in there because scaling stats are good, but again, they want to run the attack speed. Let's start talking about assassins. Well, assassins want to run armor pen marks and cooldown per level glyphs in all cases. This is Talon, Fiora, Zed, champions like this. Armor per level, health per level, both are good. I think armor per level is better because you can always buy a Hex Drinker to get your magic resist up there. Armor per level is actually very relevant. You'll take minion damage a lot. You'll get hit by AD carries a lot. Armor per level is very strong, and there's no good armor items in the assassin item pool. So I think there's a lot of value here. Attack damage quints. Assassin number 2, health per level just in case if you are facing a magic damage dealer, but the rest of your runes are all the same. Armor pen, scaling cooldowns, attack damage. Talk about a couple of junglers. Again, this type of page is good on most junglers already. 15 AD jungler, it's just fine. In fact, just to yeah, I mean this is just fine. This is just fine for Vi, Lee Sin, Kha'Zix, something like this. Actually, something like this or this is what you'd run for like a Nocturne or a Master Yi or a Tryndamere. Probably something more like this. I guess, yeah, like you would cut some magic resist, because you care about your attack damage. You run flat armor. Attack speed quints are very ideal if you care about your attack speed damage output primarily and less about your spell damage output, but attack damage marks are always good. If you're Nocturne, you might want to run this because you actually care more about tank stats, a little bit less about your DPS. Let's talk about the rest of our jungle rune pages, though. And it's going to be something like Jungle Maokai, Jungle Nautilus, maybe. They do care about ability power a little bit because they do have some spell damage that matters. But attack speed marks are very, very, very good as a jungler. Attack damage is actually just auto attacks are one of your most efficient ways to clear. It's one of the fastest ways to clear. Most of your damage actually comes out of your auto attacks. Armor seals, and then some mix of flat magic resist, scaling magic resist, maybe cooldown reduction glyphs. It's kind of up to you. It really is up in the air. All three are pretty good. The safe bet is just flat magic resist. You're going to get into these gank situations fairly often, but run whatever you feel like is optimal. I've seen all of them from pros. AP jungler, Fiddlesticks, AP Amumu, Diana. You want to run, if you care about AP and you don't care about tank stats, you really, really, really want to run flat ability power as a jungler or as a support. You're not going to level up very fast, so AP per level, not nearly as useful. AP quints help your clear speed quite a lot. Flat armor seals, always on a jungler. And Magic Pen because you trust your spell damage is high enough to not make you need attack speed marks, and they're useful outside of that case. Those should cover most of our junglers. The vast majority of our junglers should get spotted by this. Should get covered by that. Okay, let's talk about mid laners then. If you're facing a Zed or a Fiora or a Talon, one of these physical damage mid laners, maybe a Yasuo if you're against one of them as an AP mid laner. Magic Pen as always, flat armor seals. As a solo laner, you want to run scaling runes if possible, so ability power per level, and you've got your awesome ability power quints going on. Wonderful stuff. Let's say you care about a LeBlanc or an Akali killing you. Well, same as before, Magic Pen ability power, Magic Pen ability power, but health per level, flat magic resist. Health per level run very often. In case you don't know what you're facing against and you're really worried about dying or you don't have a lot of IP, again, Magic Pen, armor, magic resist, ability power. Standard AP page, once you do have the ability to buy a few more runes and maybe a few more pages, this page works 90% of the time as a mid laner. Magic Pen, scaling health, scaling ability power, ability power.